Hello, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to Top of the World. I'm Simon. This is my 1960s Volvo backloader. In the last episode, I got a problem with the brakes. And the problem, we're going to start with the problem with the compressor. The very thing that makes the compressed air that drives the brakes. And we did two repairs. We repaired the outgoing release and stop valve and the head gasket. Both of those issues, I believe, were caused by an issue further down the line. That means that the compressor has been over-compressing all last winter, which is when I had no brakes. So before last winter, the brakes failed completely. And I drove all through last winter ploughing, and so far up to this year with no brakes. That means the compressor was constantly compressing, but it wasn't compressing anything. It wasn't allowing the air to go through. And I believe that's what broke the valve and blew the head gasket. But I don't believe that was the initial problem for the brake failure. I want to give a huge shout out to everybody that has commented. The first person that gave me the biggest clue as to where I was, back by Anders. Anders, thank you. Tax and Mickey. I have got a good idea now where at the blow-off valve. You didn't answer my question exactly, but you gave me the next pointer, and that's where we got down to last episode. So there's our lovely compressor in there, all rebuilt at the top end, coming down the pipe to this. This I now believe is our blow-off valve, and I believe it's stuck for whatever reason. There's another valve there, but this. So we've got to eliminate this. So the first thing we're going to do is take this hose back off this side, because we know we've got compressed air to that point, and undo that nut. Now we can see from what's going on here, that's been off before. We can see that's not even bolted in its correct position. No, very obviously it's not bolted in its correct position. So not only will that be full of oil, I suspect it's stuck shut, and therefore it's not sending air down there to the tanks. Now I did drain the oil out the tanks, so for all those that commented, I'm obviously fully aware there should be no oil in the system. I'm also fully aware that that's blowing back from past the rings, and then it's blowing up into the top. Now there was maybe a little bit of confusion. The oil in the compressor is engine fed, so it doesn't have its own oil. It's circulated through the engine, so it can't run dry. But it has got blow-by, right? Is that a result of everything that's going on? Yeah, I believe the constant pressure of the compressor pressing air caused pressure to constantly go past the rings, expediting the wear, and then allowing oil back up. Anyway, whichever way it's happened, that compressor's been compressing for a long time without being able to actually push air. So, and prior to that, which is the most important thing, there was no oil around that compressor. Right, so that's very recent, last winter, as a result of all this. Anyway, we're going to take off this blow-off valve now. Oh, okay. Wonder which way it goes. Oh, okay, well that's loosened really easy. So we'll undo that then. Now what I should be doing is wearing gloves, because I'm mixing oily mechanics with joinery today. I've already done a couple of hours finishing off my stairs, so we'll just put these on. We've got all these big tools out here. See, it would probably be better for the machine if I had taken this side off in the winter. I really don't like working on the machine in the winter for so many obvious reasons. Anyway, it would have been better if I had disconnected this hose and just let the air run out as opposed to not. I don't suppose that's gonna do me any favours, is it? Yes, it is. Okay. So many things I found on this machine, they're just put together with, well, it's just bodged back together. So I don't know why that's no longer in the right place. I do know the previous owner, who has now since passed, God rest his soul, kept this running way beyond its time by... Oh, that's a lock nut. Oh no, that threads on to that. Right. Okay, we're going to have to take this off from the tanks. We're going to have to take this valve off together because that actually threads onto that valve. I don't suppose that's the right size for those, is it? No. Think about it, Simon. That's the wrong way. Are these reverse thread? No. Okay. That's that one correct. And then that one. All right. That's kind of what I was hoping to find. Right, can't blow through that. Right, no idea how this works, but we're going to go and take it apart on the bench. So this is where I believe the issue now is, because we know we've got compressed air coming out of this line, and we know we've got nothing going into the tanks. So we've got to be here. I don't know what sort of valve this is, but you can't blow through that either. Okay, well, let's take this all up. Nice. Let's take this in and firstly clean it up and then take it apart. There. Fresh out the parts cleaner and looking good. So when it's bolted in the tractor, it looks like that. I suppose I could actually disassemble that because we don't know which one of these is at fault or why. So, is that the blow-off valve? Well, we've got air going through there. Right, so that now I'm confused. How have we got air going through there? Well, do I really want to? And we've got to have air going through there because I can see through it. But when it was attached, we couldn't blow through that. So, what has happened? Right, we could not blow through this. And quite clearly I can blow through that. And all I've done is washed it and separated it in front of you. That's all I've done. Just screw this back together. I know you can blow through there because I can see it. Right, makes no sense. We can blow through this. Now we can. Can't blow through there. Can't blow through there. Right, so that's a non-return valve. So we won't be able to blow in that end. Well, that means air's passing through it to go to the tanks. Well, you can't blow in that way, right? No. But I just felt that valve open. But we couldn't blow through that. All right, we're a bit wiser. Westinghouse. George Westinghouse, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Right, he invented the air brake system and most importantly the air brake valves for trains, locomotives. That was shortened to WABCO and it now still exists as WABTEC. Anyway, so this is a Westinghouse air brake valve. There's many different variants. I haven't found this exact one. Is this the blow-off valve? Yes. So I can't get that open for a minute, but what I did do is I opened this. This is a pressure valve, so I've cleaned it up. It was a bit wet and a bit of a mess. So the air comes from the compressor through this valve, through this bottom line, and goes to the bottom tank. When the bottom tank is got a sufficient amount of pressure in it, set by this valve opens and then it fills the top tank. And that goes on there, the spring goes on there, and the nut on top allows you to be able to add more pressure if you so desire. And then that fits back like that and we can bolt that up. It doesn't appear to have a gasket, so it's solely reliant on that rubber. There's absolutely no evidence of any leaks. So I've cleaned it, it works, and now I can reassemble it. So then we're back to this valve, which I've subsequently discovered you can now blow through, and you definitely couldn't when I took it off the machine. So, was something stuck? Do I want to take it apart? These, this one appears to be a relatively simple one. There's a valve in the bottom of this chamber, so when the air reaches all the pressures it should do, the compressor can release, because there's a one-way valve in here, stops any air going back. Once this is all full of pressure at this end, the two tanks, and the compressor is still pumping air, when the compressor reaches like its high capacity, this is what makes that sound on air brake systems. And that releases the pressure coming from the compressor, which stops, ironically, the damage to compressors, like the head damage and the blow-by and all this stuff that we've seen. That valve in there is designed to prevent what has happened. So, has that valve failed? But that doesn't explain why we've got no air going to the air tanks, because what we've established is this valve is good and it works. I wish I knew why I couldn't blow through that when we first took it off. I don't know what's inside there other than it will be valves and rubbers and possibly diaphragms. So I'm going to have another go at getting those off. I have made an attempt, but it's all, as you can see, cast aluminium, and I don't know how much pressure to apply and how much damage I can do. And if I do successfully get it apart, a bit like the compressor, can we get it sealed up when we put it back together? I don't know. I do know that behind this plastic screw, because I undone this while it's in the tractor, there is another valve that you can compress. I don't know what the point of that is because I haven't found out the details on this exact. I wonder if that allows the pressure back past this one-way valve. Crude, I know. Well, I can hear something working, but why can I suck back through that then? If I can't blow through here, and I can't, that valve just shut. Okay. So I can blow and suck through that. But if I apply a little bit of pressure on there, I can still suck. Where is that coming from? Okay, that valve's working. Right. So I have an idea what this does, but I'm not understanding why we're not, if you can blow, I don't understand, I don't know. I couldn't blow through this when we, no, I couldn't blow through this when we took it off the tractor. Now I can. So I don't know what that means. I'd really like to somehow test this blow off valve, but there's no way I'm going to be able to hold back the compression. If I hook this up to my compressor, I don't think I'm going to be able to hold back the pressure on there, and unless I can find something to seal it off. See if I can jerry rig something. Alright, I had to put that in a vise to get that crack off. No idea what we're going to find. Feels gritty. Sprung loaded. And plenty of oil in there. There's a ball bearing in there. Oh, there's an air filter. Well, that's not going to work loaded with oil, is it? Can I see a ball in there? No. Right, well, obviously we're quite full of oil because of the rings. Right, that went in there like that. So there shouldn't be no oil in there. Before you all say, there shouldn't be no oil in there. I know that. Right, that valve works. Let's clean all this up. Get that oil out of there. Right, well, that works. So that's opening and closing as it should. Just cleaned all the oil out with that. That is an air cleaner, but a permanent one to stop debris going through. That was sitting in there like that. That spring goes on there like so, and that all goes back in there pretty much as it came out. So the blow-off valve is working. So I can't, now I've checked that, what's that coming out of there? What is that? And where's that coming from? Here? I wonder if I'm putting this back together too soon without further investigating the rest of this whilst I've semi-got it apart. Because there's a liquid that just came out of there. You know, I think I can see what that valve does now. Right. What's fascinating about that is that appears to have some kind of O-ring that's split on it. I can see, you can't see in there. Right, even to the extent that if I turn this upside down, there you go. That's a bit of O-ring. This is not the right tool for this before you all start shouting in the comments. What are you doing? Well, it's on the bench and it's next to me. Right, let's take this valve out then and check out what's occurring with this O-ring. Right, that's some kind of needle valve by the looks of that. Just lay that down there gently like that. Get you in there, show you this. If you can't already see it. That's not going to work. Okay, so that goes in there, then the spring goes back in there, that small pin goes in there, and all of that should screw back in there. Okay, and then we screw that back on there. Not quite sure the purpose of all that. Right, so we're done with all of that. I'm not going to put those too far away because I'm not sure we're done with that. Right, I suppose then the only place we haven't investigated is that. I don't know what that is, but it's got to be under some serious tension. Oh, now that don't look good, does it? That's got water and oil in that. Oh, that smells bad. That really smells bad. I don't know where that came from. Yeah. Right, well that's heavily oiled. I dare say that's another place where there's not supposed to be any oil. So that's a tensioner. That obviously goes in there, and that goes in there. So there's got to be some kind of valve in there. Let's clean all this up. Right, cleaned. Clean, clean, clean. So that's another valve in there. That's interesting. Let's go and clean them up. So there's an awful lot of contaminants in this because of the oil. Right, I don't know where that came from, so that's probably not good. Anyway, there shouldn't be any oil or contaminants in an air valve. That I'm sure of. And there are a lot of contaminants in here. Is that the cause of the problem? I don't know. I just seem to be cleaning at the minute. So does that then? It just fell out of somewhere. kind of hard for you to see what I'm doing, I think. Anyway, that's like a piston in there. And that spring there quite clearly keeps pressure on that, because that opens when it reaches a certain pressure. That ring goes in there like that. That spring goes in there. This goes on top of that spring, and all of this will have to force back together somehow so that I can do it up. That is a very there's a lot of pressure on that spring. Okay, so there it is, all cleaned up, reinstalled. It's not connected yet. So we know, right, that this is a pressure valve, and we know this is an air system safety valve. And it does two things. Well, actually it does three things. The first thing it does is this bit at the bottom is pressure release from the compressor. So when the compressor over compresses, it releases out of there, and it's likely to be over compressing because the tanks are full. So the air freely runs straight through here into here. When this tank is full, it opens this valve and it allows the air to go into the top tank. No air can travel back because there's a valve in here stopping the air, so it's a one-way valve. And this here is pressure release from this. So if this overpressures, right, it pressure releases out the top. If the compressor over compresses, it releases pressure out the bottom. So it's a safety valve, right? And this is a pressure valve. And when this reaches high enough pressure, this opens and allows this tank to fill. So there we go. They're all cleaned up, stripped apart, checked, and working. So we know there's good pressure coming out of here, so we should be able to connect this up, and there is no reason now, because that goes straight into the tanks, why those tanks won't pressure, and we've drained the tanks. So if anything's not working after this, then we're back to this. Right, do we know that the rings have failed or are failing? Yes, we know that. We know that for a fact. Right, I'm going to start it up and just check there's air pressure coming out there, and then I'm going to reconnect it. Something must be working that wasn't working before, because before we could run this up for 15-20 minutes and you'd only get 2 pumps out the brake pedal. Now look. So it's going quickly and continuously. So we got to be having good air going into the air tanks, because there was no air in the air tanks because we'd let it all out. So is that going to give us brakes? Well, it's given us a lot more than it was before. This should make a noise. Yeah. Right. Let me check the air pressure in the tank then. Definitely pumping air. So I think what we need to do now is perhaps adjust the brake on that other wheel. I've never adjusted the brakes, and then see if we've got brake. Right, I've been on this for hours now. Oh, we've got an air leak there. I can hear something leaking out the top. Is that because the tank's full? I don't know. Is there any air left in the system? Didn't have an air leak there. Got one there now. No. Oh my word. Okay, so now I've created a problem that wasn't there. So I'll explain what I've been doing and what's happened and where we are, but I now have an air leak here. What's the betting it's to do with that valve and those O-rings? Because I can't pressurise the tanks even though we've got airflow. So I've got an issue here somewhere that I didn't have, and I've only just found out I've got an issue there that I didn't have. I didn't realise that until now. So where did I move on to? Okay, so I know there used to be a series of things here, including a container which you put your tea druid in, which is your alcohol to remove the water from the air. And all this has been changed. So this is original, that is not. And there was a series of things here, and that's why that doesn't fit into those holes, because that's not an original, that's an add-on. So this must have failed at some point. And then what I turned my focus to was not this wheel, because this wheel won't work at the moment, but this wheel. And I got out all my little tools and I went under here and I removed that bottom plate there. There's nothing behind that. And I removed the top plate and there's nothing behind that. I also noticed that one of the grease nipples was broken, so I put a new one in there and filled up all 3 grease nipples. In that shot there are 3, and they're all topped off with grease. Then I went and looked at my parts manual and I discovered that how you adjust it is on this arm and specifically that nut there. So the air comes into here, right, the air from the air brake. So the air goes to the air brake, the air comes in here, pushes this shaft forwards. That shaft, right, is manually linked to the handbrake. So that can also pull that forwards. That turns a shaft in here on a spline like this. And on the end of that shaft, it's got like a rounded butterfly, which opens and closes the brake pads. And the adjuster is in there. Well, that's a bit odd. No, in here, the adjuster is on a spline, and in here is a screw thread, and on the end of this shaft is a cog. And if you turn that nut there anti-clockwise, it turns the shaft anti-clockwise. If you turn that nut there, it turns it clockwise. So in order to adjust it on this side, you turn this nut anti-clockwise, it turns this shaft anti-clockwise, and it turns the butterfly and pushes the brake pads further away. That's why this now has a very small amount of travel. Right, so it had extended travel before. So here's a diagram, what I'm talking about. That's the bolt you're seeing. That's got a spline on there. That spline goes into that cog. That cog, sitting in that cog. This spline is what the shaft that goes through here attaches to, and all that seats in there. So when you turn this anti-clockwise, it turns this anti-clockwise and then adjusts the brakes. So that is how, if it makes any sense, that is how you adjust the brakes. Clockwise and anti-clockwise. Anti-clockwise tightens them, and clockwise loosens them. So that has got a spline on it, and that. I think that probably sits in there, and that sits in there, and that sits on that. And then the shaft that has a butterfly on the end of it that pushes the brake pads apart goes on there. How do you know that, Simon? Because this is a parts manual. And this is the shaft we're talking about. And that's the butterfly I'm talking about. And this is the braking mechanism. And there's the adjuster behind there that you can't see. And that bar turns that. And that sits in there, does that, and pushes these apart. And that's what adjusts it. So if you've got a parts manual, it'd be nice to have a service manual. This here is the picture that tells me none of it's original. So originally it had a chamber here, which I'm assuming was a drain. That is the safety valve with the blow off. This was the container that you put your alcohol in to take the water out, and this was the splitter valve. And that's obviously the compressor. Well, that and that and that have gone. And you've just got a rubber line that runs down here and replaces it with that single unit that we've took apart. And then you've got the tanks, of course, and then the tanks go to the foot pedal, and the foot pedal distributes the air between the two brakes. So quite simple, really. Anyway, that's how I know what I know. I just didn't know what that valve did that we don't have anymore. And we can use the manual brake, which I've adjusted it to, which is there. Right, that also hardly moves now. So if I hold you there, and then, are we looking at the right thing? Yeah, there's very little movement, and then it's solid. So that handbrake is now solid. Also, it moves this one. So I have now adjusted both sets of brakes, and I've run it and I've tried to move it, and it has brakes that makes no difference. Oh, the liners disintegrated. Have the liners got covered in grease and oil? Do they just not work anymore? I don't know. I've got pressure to the brakes. I've gone right through this brake system and we're all good. I've gone back to the brake system that I took a small part this morning, and I've created an air leak in this. I have created an additional air leak that wasn't there before. I don't know where that air leak is coming from. It appears to be coming out of this top, and this top is related to this valve here. And I changed the O-rings because the O-rings were broken. Maybe not, I don't know. But this wasn't leaking air before, and now it is. And it's not holding air in the tanks. Why? I don't know. Why can I not pressurise those tanks? They were pressurised. Or were they just having enough pressure in because this was flowing this way? I don't know. That valve was working. So I've interfered in this, cleaned it all up, made it better, and created an additional problem. So that's another, I don't know what I've been on it now, 4 or 5 hours today, and I've got absolutely no further. I have learnt a lot. I've cleaned things up if I've gotten. But I can't help feeling I've gone backwards because I've done all that and still got no brakes. But now I've got a leak that I didn't have before. Although arguably I've got a valve that wasn't working before. So have I done all this? Here's the question. Have I done all of this and it was already working, and it's just the brakes don't work at the actual brake end? I don't know. Thank you all for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.